What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is Bull Season 3, Episode 17, Parental Guidance. So it's been a minute, but I'm back doing Bull reviews again. I know I just uploaded, a couple, I think last week or something. But no, it's been a while since I've actually watched and reviewed one, so we're getting back to it. But yeah, so this one, decent episode to start back. It wasn't anything special, but it was also just heartfelt enough to get me to enjoy it. First of all, the kid was a fantastic actor, in my opinion. He just had this really good way of portraying, very confused, and, you really did feel bad for him throughout the entire episode. At least I did. So I thought they picked a good kid to play that character. And then also, just something about the mom, too. At first, I thought she was going to be kind of goofy, but she turned it into being a really real character, in my opinion. I don't know, she seemed very real to me. She seemed like somebody who's just I don't want to be here. I'm not, I'm drunk and I don't want to be here. It was interesting. So those two were good characters, in my opinion, and the story itself was kind of interesting, seeing them have to take on this kid's case who was just stuck with his father, who was constantly telling him everybody's the enemy. But there are a few things about this that didn't really work, that made it just kind of an episode. First of all, the stuff with Bull and the kid, it was kind of weird because I guess he's trying to be a leader like his father was for him, but be a good leader. I guess that was the idea behind it, but it came off a little weird because when he was doing it, it seemed very forceful, like his father was. I'm just I feel like you're not really helping this kid's psyche by essentially doing what his dad did to him as well, just on a nicer scale. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I obviously have not studied psychology, so I wouldn't be able to tell you. But it seems a little weird to me that you would continue to do what his father did. Continue to tell him, hey, do this, listen to us, do what he says to do. Just telling him what to do. And I guess part of that is because the kid is so, follow the leader. He doesn't know anything. He's only had one leader to follow, his dad. And so now it's without that leadership, maybe he does need somebody to tell him. But the way he was doing it seemed a little similar to what his dad was doing too. So I don't know, something about that didn't seem right to me. It seemed like you're contributing to this bad psyche. But again, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know for sure. Maybe I'm wrong about that. The other thing that didn't really work is Marissa in this episode. This is a good episode, sure, to talk about parenting, except she's not a parent. So instead, they talk about, does she want to be a parent? And the thing is, I'm not a big fan of this cliche storyline in the first place, but they didn't actually tie her into this episode at all, or at least the case. Is what I meant to say. They didn't tie her into the case. They gave her own separate story, where apparently her husband finds out that she froze some of her eggs, and then she goes to this random coffee shop, and then there's a kid there, and then she's talking to Taylor at one point, and talks to Taylor about being a mom, and I'm just could we actually focus on this case and show what it means to Marissa? Because at the end of the episode, yeah, she tied it all together. She's like, we took this case with this kid and what his dad did to him and all of this stuff and blah, blah, blah. I'm just yeah, but you could have been showing us that. You could have been showing us what this case was doing to her, what this case was doing to her mentally. This idea that, do I want to be a parent? When this, sure, it would be a little coincidental that her husband finds out about these frozen eggs and asks her if she wants to be a mom right as soon as they take this case. But it's storytelling, so I can suspend my disbelief and say, oh, okay, so sure, that could happen. It could coincidentally happen where she starts thinking about being a parent right as soon as this case gets taken. But the thing is, you didn't tie them together. You pushed her to the side. You basically said, all right, here, Marissa, go on your own little side quest. I don't know, that's bad storytelling in my opinion. Because you had a good setup for it. You had a good premise for telling this story about Marissa possibly wanting to be a mom. Very good story setup, good case to go along with it, but then you don't tie them together until the very end. You don't show how it connects and intertwines throughout the episode. I just think that was a missed opportunity. And again, I'm not a big fan of this story already, so you gotta get me invested somehow. Dealing with this kid, if she had had a chance to talk to the kid a bit more, maybe, I feel like that would have gotten me more invested in this story. But as it is, it was just basically distracting from the main plot. And I'm just sitting here waiting for us to get back to the case and see what's going on there. So, in my opinion, very poor storytelling, very poor build up in the character sense. And then the last thing that just, it was a moment that kind of stood out to me and I was just kind of confused. Um, the the one woman, Yvonne, I think it was her name. So there's this woman who took care of Lucas for like 3 weeks, and she took him to church and basically watched him for 3 weeks. And so the prosecution was trying to say, look, he had other influences in his life aside from his dad. He chose to be with his dad. He chose to fire that gun. And so I'm thinking, okay, so either I wasn't really sure where it was going at this point. I'm thinking, okay, so either they're going to find a way to show that deep down he really is good, and his father corrupted him in that moment, or this woman's lying. And the thing that made me think that maybe she was lying is because she's telling this story. She's like, yeah, I took him to church. And first of all, she was not taking calls from Danny, which was also a little suspect. But then she's like, yeah, I took him to church one week. In fact, I was teaching Sunday school. He came with me. And the prosecutor's like, and what were you teaching that week? Well, we were teaching the Ten Commandments. And that week was thou shalt not kill. And all I could think was, okay, she's lying. She's lying. This is a bold-faced lie. Because how coincidental. If I was in the jury, I would go, okay, you're lying. You've got to be lying. The fact that, oh yeah, I took him to church once, or I just happened to be teaching Sunday school that one time, and it just happened to be thou shalt not kill, and somebody died because he shot at people. Come on. And the thing is, the problem is that she wasn't lying. She was telling the truth. Which means this was just poor screenwriting. This was just a very poorly executed, like, oh, guys, see, look, this is unlucky, she happened to teach thou shalt not kill on the week that he was at Sunday school. Darn, I guess that means we gotta rethink our strategy. It's like, that's gotta be your reason why you gotta rethink your strategy. You can't find another way to show, no, he could deduce right from wrong. You couldn't find another way to show that. You had to make it where it's this stupid coincidental thing where he happened to go to Sunday school, she happened to be teaching it, she happened to remember exactly what they were teaching, and it was thou shalt not kill. Like, you've got to realize how dumb that is and how coincidental and how just when I heard that, because that was the thing. As soon as she said, "Oh yeah, we were teaching the Ten Commandments," I'm like, "Oh my God, please don't say that you were teaching thou shalt not kill." We were teaching one in particular. Is it gonna be five? It's gonna be five. Commandment number 5. Oh my God, like, how? How did a screenwriter write up this scene and think, oh yeah, this is gonna be dramatic, guys. Ooh, she was teaching thou shalt not kill. What are they gonna do now? How are they gonna get out of this predicament? Again, if this were real life and I was on a jury and this woman came in and said all of this stuff, I would think she was just lying out of her ass. Because what are the freaking chances? It wasn't like, oh yeah, he went to church several times and I taught Sunday school while he was there several times. It was she brought him to church. Well, okay, I think she said she might have brought him to church like a couple times. But there was one week where he came to Sunday school and she was teaching and they taught thou shalt not kill. Just like, okay, sure, whatever. So anyway, I know I ranted a little bit, but overall, like, I still enjoyed it for the most part, and I like how it ended. I like the fact that he got a chance to go be with the family. Um, but yeah, there was just a couple moments that, again, with all this stuff with Marissa, the stuff, whether or not psychology, I don't know what psychology would say about what's going on with the kid. But then that one scene just kind of like took the cake for me of just like, what are you guys doing? What are you trying to do here? So anyways, with all that being said, that's it for this episode. On to the next one. See you there. And now episode 18, Don't Say a Word. This episode lost me about, God, not even halfway through. I think, honestly, it was about maybe a third of the way through. I don't know, it might have been half. Yeah, so whenever you've got a man who is grandfather to these two children, and he's up on the stand, and they're talking about what a great guy he is, and they're talking about, what an honorable man he is. Like, even the prosecutor, or I guess not the prosecutor, the guy who's representing the douchebag Reed. As soon as he gets up there and he starts talking about, like, oh, maybe you want to keep the girls because of the sizable amount of money. He's like, no, they can keep the money. We're just trying to keep these girls safe. And then he comes out with, well, you say you're an honorable man. How about we talk about what happened 40 years ago? You have a child, don't you? And you haven't once been a part of that child's life, have you? And you're telling me you're going to raise these children well. Please. You can't take care of a child that you had 40 years ago. How could you take care of these two little girls? Okay. Does it look bad? Yeah. This guy gave up a kid that apparently he hasn't even mentioned for 40 years. His wife didn't even know about it. Does that look bad? Absolutely. It looks bad. On paper. Then you hear about what actually happened. You hear that he was 19 at the time. 19-year-old kid has a fling with his girlfriend at the time. Girl gets pregnant. It was an accident. She decided, I don't want you to take care of the kid. I'm going to go take him, or I think it was him, yeah. I'm going to take him to go be with somebody else to raise him. So, not only was this 40 years ago, not only was he 19 years old when this happened, not only was it not his fault that he couldn't be a part of the kid's life, but also, in all of this, he clearly was a good enough parent to raise another kid, his daughter. He raised her. So, excuse me if I don't for 1 minute believe that this could possibly influence a jury. There's no freaking jury in the world that's going to sit here and think, oh, you gave up a kid when you were 19, when you were just a kid? God, I mean, you're a grown ass man now. There's no way you're going to be able to raise a kid. If you couldn't make that decision when you were basically a kid, you're not going to be able to make that decision now that you're an adult. There's no way. I mean, I know you've had 40 years of freaking growing to do, but there's no way you've grown enough to be able to actually raise a kid now. Hello? Like, oh my... As soon as they brought this up, first of all, when he said it was 40 years ago, all I could think was, so? But then they tell the story, and the story doesn't make any sense as to how it's supposed to be detrimental to the case. But we can't make it easy. It's the same thing that happened in the last episode when they had the woman show up, and she's all like, yeah, we were teaching Sunday school, and the one time I was doing it, we taught thou shalt not kill. It's like you couldn't come up with a more reasonable explanation. You just had to make it so coincidental and so unbelievable that this could happen. Now, not only are you bringing up this coincidence, but also this is somehow supposed to convince the jury that, yeah, they're not going to be compatible to be able to raise kids. They're not going to be able to do it because he wasn't able to do it 40 years ago. Even though he's done it since then. Oh my God. Like, whenever I heard this, I've still got a little bit of a residual migraine from where I smacked my forehead. Because I just don't understand. Again, writing team. What goes through your mind? What honestly goes through your mind that you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, so how are we going to make this difficult? How are we going to make this hard? How are we going to make it to where the team can't just figure this out? I know. Let's have the dad, who seems like such an honorable man, or the grandfather, let's have him have something dark in his past. What could it be? Well, what could it be that, he could have done that would be enough to convince a jury? Oh, what if he used to be a dad, but he didn't raise a kid well? Okay, Jerry, but how does that make any sense? I'm the producer, so I say ghosts. How many drinks have you had, Jerry? One, maybe. Is that how the conversation went? I know, I went off on a weird tangent there. I'm kind of tired. again, I have a headache now. I just don't get it. Like, it really jumped the shark in this episode for me. Now, rest of the episode, it is what it is. They find out that Diana and Bull, were together. They find out that she told him about the case. I still think it was kind of a BS way for them to find out because it's just like, oh, well, how do they know about that? I only told her and she must have told them. And that was enough to get the judge to go, well, Bull, I mean, how'd you find out about the case in the first place then? And then we find out, oh, yeah, I told him. And I don't know, I feel like there's a million ways around that. And kind of weird that, oh, because the attorney told this guy about this case and asked him to take on the case of the children, like somehow that's enough to be like, oh, this is a mistrial. She didn't give him any information aside from the case itself. That's the only information she gave him. And somehow that's enough to be like, yeah, mistrial, we gotta do this again. And you guys aren't allowed to use that one incriminating thing that's gonna make sure that I don't get the girls because that's just how it works in our law system. But then, thankfully, of course, that leads to they find out about this thing where he tampered with a witness, with the daughter, and all that stuff. I'm glad he's going to jail, and I'm glad that the story wrapped up nicely. But that one moment in the episode was enough to just make me think this is not a good episode. This episode was BS because that moment doesn't make any sense. If anybody else thought differently, I mean, I've not been getting any views on my Bull videos anyway, so I don't even know if anybody's going to watch this. I'm talking to myself mainly. But, like, I want to know how that could make sense. I want to know who that would convince. If you were on a jury and you're in this thing and they're asking about who's going to take care of the kids, and you find out that the grandfather of these two little girls, grandfather, which means he had to raise a son or a daughter that raised these kids for, a little bit. That grandfather was not able to raise a kid 40 years ago, and it's not even his fault. It was the mother's decision that he wasn't allowed to raise the son. That's going to be enough to convince you, oh yeah, the dad should be able to raise him. And I get the fact that the jury is very swayed by the father. I get the fact he's a very good liar and very charming and convincing to a jury. So I understand that, yeah, it might have tipped a couple jurors, like, to think, oh, well, he does have that. And maybe the mindset was that little bit was enough to say, well, I could see either of them raising him or raising the kids. So that one little bit, I guess I'll go with the father instead. Like, if that were the case, then maybe I could buy it. Just barely a little bit. But the fact that it was such a small thing that just destroyed their case, like everybody's talking like they lost. I don't know, I'm just so confused. So confused as how that makes any sense at all. But anyways, with all that being said, that's it for this episode. On to the final of these three. Hopefully it's better. See you there. And finally, episode 19, Bounty. So this one was okay. I think one of the problems with this show sometimes is that occasionally they'll write a case that is very interesting, and it does grab my attention a bit, but then unfortunately we spend more time in the courtroom than we do figuring out what's going on. And don't get me wrong, like, I get that's more what this show is about, but sometimes whenever you have a case that's this interesting and so many different moving parts that are interesting, you kind of want to see what's going on with the case more than you do what's going on inside the courtroom. And that's kind of the biggest problem this episode had, is I was intrigued. Like, how do you defend this? How are they going to win this? Because he definitely did everything that he said he did, but he was doing it for a good reason. You got this ADA who, I'm going to be perfectly honest, wasn't really a big fan of her. Nothing against her or her character or anything. Like, I get what they were going for. I just honestly think she was miscast. The girl playing her, like, she did not seem like a lawyer. Just listening to her talk, I'm thinking she sounds like a yoga instructor. She sounds like a motivational speaker. Like, she doesn't sound like a lawyer. She doesn't sound like she's got that hard cutting voice. She doesn't have that demeanor about her that I think of when I think of a lawyer. Like, going in there and just willing to talk to basically the jury and really ask the tough questions. She didn't seem like that type of person just by looking at her, by listening to her. So I just think she was miscast. The girl playing her, not a bad actress at all. But yeah, they didn't really pick a girl that sounded or looked like a lawyer at all. So, but anyway, so you got all of this good setup. You got this guy that Danny used to know, used to work in the FBI. You got him dealing with this whole thing where he punched the wrong guy, he kidnapped the wrong guy, and then it got more interesting. You find the video where the guy suddenly just wakes up after 3 hours of being unconscious. He like waits for I think his name was wait, what was his name? Trent? Yeah, pretty sure it was Trent. But he leaves and leaves the guy in the emergency room, and then 3 minutes later, the guy just like wakes up and walks out like nothing happened. So you're dealing with that, which makes it very interesting because it's like, well, then what's going on with this guy? And then you find out apparently this whole thing has been going on with the bondsman and the guy who got away, and this guy who apparently looks similar to the guy who got away. I mean, it was a very good setup and a very interesting thing to find out. But the problem is that we're just sort of sitting here waiting for it to happen throughout most of the episode. And again, I get that's the show, but unfortunately, it kind of hindered this case. I would have liked to see a bit more, like when they figured it out and when they went and did all of this stuff. Because Bull is talking to the ADA at the end of all of this, and he's talking about all this stuff that they have that they're about to talk about if she doesn't just drop the charges. And I'm just thinking, well, when did all of this happen? Like, it seems like they went and did all of this stuff really quickly. So, I don't know. I know the show is mainly about being in the courtroom and the science behind the courtroom, but I would also like to see a little bit when they actually do go out and do research a bit and do find some stuff out. Um, so I don't know. It's difficult because you want to keep the identity of the show, but also there are moments like this where keeping that identity really hinders the story sometimes. Um, so, anyways, with all that being said, though, that's about it for these 3 episodes. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these 3? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Bull reviews, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.